Good morning, friends. In the last session, I was talking about a rather, as I said, a rather contentious point, that is about the caste system as we see in India today. And I was saying that caste is something which is not mentioned in the scriptures. Caste is something which is a social development, as I am going to explain. And in the last session, I was explaining how the scriptures, starting from the Vedas, they have discussed the variety of human nature from the point of view of three gunas. So, if we see the visualization, not the visualization, if we see the way in which we have visualized the whole universe, over and above the whole universe, or rather the entire universe is pervaded by what is called Supreme Brahman or pure consciousness alone. And in this consciousness, there is a manifestation called Prakriti, or a creative power. And that creative power is responsible for so much of diversity which we see in the world. And this diversity is caused by the three factors or constituents or aspects of that Prakriti. These three aspects are called the Sattva, Rajas and Tamas. So these three things I explained in the last class. And even earlier we had seen, about how this universe has emerged, how human being has emerged, how the mind and the senses have emerged. While discussing that, how the world has evolved actually. So while discussing all those things, we had discussed that those three aspects called Sattva, Rajas and Tamas. So in the human beings, how do these things affect the human being? The predominance of Sattva produces a particular type of qualities. Predominance of Rajas produces another type of qualities. Predominance of Sattva, for example, produces somebody who is keen on knowledge, who is contented, truthful, virtuous, so that type of personality. Then predominance of Rajas can produce two types of personalities. One who aspires for physical domination and one who is acquisitive, who wants material wealth. Predominance of Tamas produces the lazy type of man, totally lacking in initiative. So the scriptures have only talked about that. Scriptures have not talked about the caste as we see now. And scriptures have also told, for example, I was telling about the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, they have also told that in the beginning there was only one Varna, that is, everybody was one and the same, and then that did not meet the demands of the society, because you visualize a very, very primitive society where there was absolutely no categorization, no stratification, no distinction. Everybody was one and the same. There was a need for somebody to gain some expertise in fighting, because somebody else came and then he invaded you. Then there should be somebody to fight. And then that somebody, if he can dedicate himself more on that, if he can develop some expertise in that, so he will be a better fighter. So that way some people, they became dedicated for that, for protecting all others. And some people became dedicated for generating wealth, accumulating wealth, and generating wealth for the whole society. And some other people who were not so brilliant, they were doing various types of jobs. So this is how these four categories evolved. This Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, these four Varnas, they evolved depending on the predominance of these gunas. Predominance of these gunas are aspects of nature in them. So basically it was something which is the guna which was determining the shape, the Varna of a person, and not birth. And then I gave several examples of how several people who are not Brahmins or Kshatriyas, they are being worshipped by us. For example, Lord Krishna is being worshipped. Lord Krishna is a cowherd. And then Valmiki, sage Valmiki, he was a hunter. And then he became a monk, and then he became a saint. And then he is now worshipped by us. There are several saints. If we see the whole list of our rishis, there are so many of our rishis who are some of them, most of them are Brahmins, and some of them are not Brahmins. In the whole Sanskrit literature, if we see, there are so many people who are from all the Varnas. So this is what we have seen in the last class. Then the basic question is, how is it we are seeing so much of caste now. So the moment you touch a man in Indian society, he wants to know your caste. He will try to put a question, some indirect question. So or rather he will indirectly convey that he belongs to your caste, saying that, oh, I am related to so and so, who is also related to you or whom you know well. So then you immediately link up, and then there is a sort of bonhomie. So this type of, so all this all this play, the games people play, as they say, all these games we play in order to know the caste of a person and also to indicate your caste to the other man. So how did this emerge? So if we see that, so then for this there are certain social reasons. That is, if we see the agricultural society, not only in olden days, but till very, very recently, even when I was a child, even when I was a boy, I grew up in a village for a long, long time. For about 20 years I grew up in a village, and only then, of course, I was frequently going to a college and then getting back to my village. So I grew up in a village which had a totally different structure. That is, a village was an economically independent unit, an economically self-sufficient unit. Even about 40-50 years ago. You imagine a village about 100 years ago. The village was absolutely economically self-sufficient, because the village, for example, there was one priest, one or two, three, whatever it is, there are some families of priestly class. So they used to take care of the religious needs of the people. So they used to go to the temple, they used to do some worship, and then they used to look after the various, they used to counsel people on various points. Suppose somebody says, okay, I want to build a house, you please tell me what is a good muhurat. So this man he consults his almanac, and then he will say, okay, this is the good muhurat. Then again this man, he wants some gold bangle. So he goes to the, the goldsmith. So there is a village goldsmith. There is a village ironsmith who is making all these implements, all the implements for, maybe for agriculture, maybe for everything. For agriculture, lot many implements are needed. So there is a carpenter who is in great demand, because he has to prepare all these wheels, bullock carts, etc. That is a very great industry. That is a very great village industry I have seen in my village. How that carpenter was always doing that carpenter's work, and then he was making all those wheels. And then he had to go to that ironsmith, and then both of them jointly they have to put that whole an iron rim around that wooden wheel. So how that wooden wheels have to be connected with an axle, and how that axle has to be fitted with some iron rods. So there was a lot of joint effort by the ironsmith and also by the carpenter. And there was another fellow who was doing all this bellowing work. And then another fellow called a barber, he was also doubling up as a musician, village musician. Village, we call it melam or band, as we call the pipe band, a type of pipe band used to exist. They used to bring their own pipes, and then on all auspicious occasions they used to play music. So they were also playing music, but at the same time they were also doing this barber's job. There was a washerman, there was a potter. Potter was another very, very important man, because for every occasion you need a pot. You need a new pot for every occasion, whether it is a good occasion or a bad occasion. So you are performing a marriage, you need some new pots, and then new utensils from the potter. So like that, a potter is in demand, a goldsmith is in demand, an ironsmith is in demand, a carpenter is in demand. All the people, and also a weaver, another most important man, because all the clothes which we needed, they were all woven by that weaver. So this whole village, it was totally self-sufficient. And then, suppose a goldsmith has to perform marriage of his daughter. Then what will he see? So he will see in his own village, if there is nobody in his own village, a suitable, bridegroom, so he will go to the neighboring village, and naturally he will choose somebody belonging to that goldsmith profession only. He is a goldsmith by profession. So he will choose another goldsmith's son to give his daughter, so that the skill is preserved. Or he and his son-in-law can jointly work. He and the other family people, the other group, they can work together. So this sort of profession, the village profession called goldsmith or an ironsmith or a weaver or whatever it is, by way of intermarriages within that same profession, So the profession became a caste. So this is what we can see right from the beginning. Even in, say, if you are familiar with what is this Namakam. Namakam, it relates so many trades. Namakam is a, say, prayer to Lord Shiva, that is seeing Lord Shiva in everything we see around us. That is Sarvatma Bhava, in other words. That is knowing Brahma, seeing Brahman everywhere. So there, instead of Brahman, we are calling it Shiva. So seeing Shiva or seeing Rudra in all things, all around. So that is what we see. There are so many professions described in that, say, including thieves. Stenebhyah, Namo Mahadhyah, Chullakebhyascha Namo. So like that, so many professions have been described there. So which means that all these professions, they existed right from the beginning, because the society is thousands and thousands of years old, and Indian civilization, it is several thousand years old. And then all these professions existed, and these professions gradually crystallized into what we call caste. And among these professions, there were all these people, they were all originally called Dvijas only, except the people who were doing some scavenging work. All of the people, they were called Dvijas. If you can see the last slide about the Dvija, the concept of Dvija, that is second slide on that concept of Dvija, it included a majority of the people in the society. Because all these people, they were all, people who were engaged in producing wealth. A potter, a weaver, a goldsmith, an ironsmith, all these people, they are all people who are producing wealth. And then by definition, they were all Dvijas. And then several people, till recently, they were also wearing the sacred thread. If you have seen in village, if you have seen an Indian village, if you go to old people now, even today, a weaver, a person of the weaver community, he will be wearing a gold, say, this sacred thread. Similarly, an ironsmith, a goldsmiths even today, most of the goldsmiths, they do wear this, this thread. So like that, several people were wearing this janu, and then several people were also reading our books like Mahabharata, Ramayana, etc., etc. So all these people, they were Dvijas, but over a period of time, gradually when they gave up, because of so much of social turmoil in India faced so much of social turmoil, because it was not a peaceful society. It was not a peaceful society in the sense, it was a peaceful society actually, and then it was invaded by others. The peace was disturbed by others. Otherwise it was a peaceful society. The peace was disturbed by others who came as invaders. So there was so much of social turmoil, and in this social turmoil, we do not know what type of stress all these people underwent. Several people got converted, several people got killed, and then under so much of pressure, so all these things, they survived. So anyway, this caste is something which started as a profession among the Dvijas, and then that profession became gradually crystallized as caste, and then they, over a period of time, they forgot their rituals and all that. Though of course, they were basically obedient, they were basically going and then consulting the Brahmin for various religious needs, they were doing all the pujas, etc. But on their own, they forgot their Nitya Karma. Nitya Karma means their compulsory duties. For a Dvija, Nitya Karma is compulsory. Study of Veda was compulsory. Study of Veda also, most of the people they forgot. Of course, very few people they retained. Because we come across several kings in history, if we see, even till about 17th, 18th, 19th century history also, there are several poets, there are several kings and noblemen who were very great scholars in Sanskrit, and very great scholars not only in Sanskrit, even in Vedic literature. For example, the Maharaja of Vijayanagaram. So he was till recently, till about 19th century end, till about 20th century beginning. There was a Maharaja who was known to be a well-known scholar in Vedic literature. So like that, till recently, all these people, they were very proficient. Only now in the last 100 years, like everybody has changed, like even the Brahmins have changed, like even the Brahmins have forgotten their own roots, all other people are also forgetting. And then we are thinking that, okay, this is something, our own culture is something which is an alien culture for us. So that is the situation. So now, let us come to the next slide about caste. So this, the first point I have written is social stratification is seen in all society. It is not as though it is only in India. So this class, like this priestly class, and then a warrior class, and economic trading class, and also the work artisans. These are the four things which is seen in almost all societies. Then caste, of course, as I said, is not mentioned in the scriptures. It is a later development. It is a social development. And village, as I explained, is an economically self-sufficient unit. And these people, by virtue of their profession, they intermarried with people, from the same profession, people who are in the same profession. So that is how that gradually crystallized into, got established as a caste. And several Vaishyas, they gave up the Vedic rituals and then started assuming, not calling themselves, we can say started assuming that they were Shudras. So that is what has happened. So this is what we can see. Let us come to the next slide. This is a more sensitive issue than the earlier, the issue of caste. That is the issue of untouchability, as we call it, untouchable. So this again, as we call it in Sanskrit, the Sanskrit word is asprishyata. Asprishyata. This word is nowhere there in our scriptures. You please take it. It is nowhere there in our scriptures. This word asprishyata, that untouchability, is not at all there. It is again a social practice which has emerged. That is because of the type of work which some people were doing in the society. That is the scavenging work. Only those people who were engaged in this scavenging or removing all these carcasses, the people, suppose there is a dead animal, so the dead animal has to be disposed of. So some people who were dealing with that, or some people who were doing this skinning of animals and things like that. So people who were engaged in rather unhygienic, mostly unhygienic activities, they were treated as untouchables till about recently. So till about recently, it is very, very unfortunate that system continued. Of course, this same system is there. The system of removing all this the human wastage, all these things, it is there in every society. But then over a period of time, as and when technology has changed, in accordance with technology, all these things also have changed. According to technology, these things have also changed. So when I long ago went to UK, we were told that for the king there were two palaces. So one palace in one place, another palace in one place. I forget the names of those palaces. One is Buckingham Palace and the other is some other palace. So there the king used to shift. Every 6 months he used to shift from one palace to another palace. For one reason. That is because all this human waste which was there in one place, it has to be removed over a period of time, and it has to dry up and it has to be cleaned up. And then for that period he will be there in another place. So he and his followers, he will be there in that other mansion. And then after 6 months they will come to this. So this will be cleaned by that time. So the king was shifting between two palaces. So this was the picture. So which means that this is a problem which is there everywhere. So but anyway, in India till recently this problem was there. But then have you come to that slide?
Yes, sir.
So those who performed the scavenging work were treated as untouchables, but it has nothing to do with religion. This has nothing to do with religion. If we say that caste is something to do with religion, it is something which is absurd. It is like saying that Christianity has something to do with slavery. Christianity has nothing to do with slavery. Similarly, caste has nothing to do with slavery. Of course, when we see slavery is to some extent justified by some people. Slavery, it was religiously justified by some people. Of course, I will not go into that. Quoting certain things from the Bible itself, they justified slavery. But then it was not like that in our case. Caste is a social development. So similarly, untouchability is a social development. It is there in later texts like Dharma Shastra texts. Caste has, how caste has evolved, it is there. Even in those Dharma Shastras, this untouchability is not there. Whether it is a Manodharma Shastra or some other Dharma Shastra. Then, this is, as I said, it is similar to the segregation of blacks in the Western countries, or apartheid. Apartheid is there. Apartheid was one practice which was there till about 1960s in South Africa. The British, they practiced this system till about 1960s, till Nelson Mandela and others, they fought. So this apartheid, this is something like that. And then one notable thing, one thing which we have to very, very proudly note is that in India there was no slavery. in most parts of the world there was slavery. That is, people were abducted, people were, suppose the Europeans, wherever they went, they invaded, they captured them as laborers, they actually bound them, they chained them, and then they took them to their place, they auctioned them in markets, and then this sort of, total violation of human rights. Of course, now the Western world is talking to us about human rights. But the past is, such human rights, such gross violation of human rights was there. And then in India, there was no such thing. There was no, slavery in India whatsoever. So this is one thing which we have to see. And Indian government has taken all legal steps, because we were under British rule till 1947. And immediately after independence, we took all steps. Immediately after independence, the government has taken care to see that everybody has got a voting right. In fact, in other countries, in Western countries, the blacks did not have voting rights till recently, till about 1960s and all that. Even women did not have voting rights in several places. Women did not have voting rights till about 60s and 70s. Even now, women, they get less pay in Western countries, but it's not so in India. So anyway, leave it. But regarding this untouchability and all that, all legal steps were taken by the Indian government immediately after, independence. And this is not opposed by anyone in society. This is not opposed by either the people of religion. We have got all the religious heads, all these Mathadipatis and Peethadipatis. There is no opposition from them. Everybody endorsed it. Everybody endorsed all the social legislation which has come up in the social legislation that has been made by the government. Social legislation means legislation relating to untouchability, legislation relating to, protection of civil rights, legislation relating to atrocities on scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. All these things, not a single thing has been opposed. Everything has been endorsed by all the religious heads, which only shows that the society is very much mature, and the society is accepting, and not only accepting, it is recommending that the society is fully in tandem, working in tandem with the government. So this is what we see regarding this caste. Then if we see, we can just see some of the examples in olden days. We can see one or two more points about this untouchability. About this untouchability, we hear some stories. For example, the sage Shankaracharya. Sage Shankaracharya, of course, he is from the 8th century. So a story is told about Shankaracharya, that he was walking on the streets of Benares, that is Kashi, Varanasi, or Benares as we call it now. So there he came across a person of this untouchable caste, that is Chandala it is called. There is a name also for that, Chandala. And Chandala, according to Manusmriti, is one who is born from a Brahmin woman to a Shudra. If a Brahmin woman produces a child from a Shudra, that child is called a Chandala. It was called so because in those days they were very much worried about the purity of the clan. Purity of the clan. So that is why, in order to discourage women from intermarrying, so they held like that. It was the order of those days. But this Chandala is not something which is untouchable. But still, with the Shankaracharya, it seems he said apasara, apasara. Apasara means just give side, give way, give way. Then that Chandala seems to have asked him, "Oh my dear sir, you are talking about this universal vision, Sarvatma Bhava and all that. Shunichaiva Shvapakecha Panditas Samadarshina." So a wise man, he is supposed to see Brahman in everything. Don't you see Brahman in me? Are you asking my body to go away, or are you asking the Brahman in me to go away? So that is what he asked. When you are asking me to go away, are you asking my body to go away, or are you asking the Brahman in me to go away? Then Shankaracharya, he seems to have realized his mistake. He immediately apologized to him. He saluted him. And then at that time he told 5 shlokas, highly memorable shlokas, which are called Manisha Panchakam. Chandalostu Satudvijostu Gururityesha Manisha Mama. So that all those 5 shlokas end with that line. Chandalostu Satudvijostu. Whether he is a Chandala or a Dvija, He is a master, he is a guru to me. The one who has this type of vision, he is a guru to me. He is my teacher. So he bowed to that man and then he went away. So like that. So it is a story told about Shankaracharya, saying how Shankaracharya also was so much concerned about this thing. Then sage Ramanuja, if we come to Ramanuja was another man who was a great reformer. We forget about that. By Ramanuja's time, he was born in Tamil Nadu. Ramanuja was a great reformer. At that time, again the same, downtrodden castes, they were agitating. Because at that time, the Brahmins were only mostly, dominating all this ritual, all this spiritual field. The Brahmins and also Kshatriyas and other so-called upper castes. So when there was a sort of ban, let us say, a sort of restriction that this Narayana mantra should not be told to anybody, any of the Shudra category, then this Ramanuja, he seems to have climbed up to the rooftop of the temple and then he called all the people, yes, all come, all of you come, I am going to tell you this Narayana mantra. Then he told that Narayana mantra to everybody. He told to everyone. And then though the orthodox people, they said, no, you are doing something, you are violating God's order and all that. He said, okay, if I alone go to hell, I will go to hell. But all these people will go to heaven. So he said. So like that, right from the beginning in our society, there have been several people who were sensitive to this issue and then who wanted our behavior to be totally different. But unfortunately, the system persisted for some time. Then again, if we see the modern examples, say for example, modern examples means with the British, if we see the British example, Gandhiji, we know that he was thrown out by the British when he was traveling by first class in South Africa. He was just dragged out and then thrown out by one British gentleman. So this is what was there till recently by the British. More recent is, of course, the South African apartheid, as I said, till Nelson Mandela and others, they fought right from 1960s. So then, say the African, of course, Africans, they were all physically abducted, they were all chained, turned into slaves, and then they were auctioned in the European markets and also in the American market. And we know that Abraham Lincoln, he actually laid down, he was shot down. Because he was fighting for the cause of the blacks. So like that, there were so many things. The Greeks and Romans, of course, if we see Greek and Roman history, slavery was an institution. Slavery was very much there. It is only in India that we never had slavery. Even today we don't have slavery. But unfortunately, the Western media even today say that in India there is a slavery. So they catch hold of somebody who is some small poor boy, working somewhere, and then they say he is a slave. So there is no end to propaganda. So, but then if we see the social society as a whole, we find that this is Varna alone is there mentioned in our in our entire scriptures. Varna again depending on the Sattva, Rajas, Tamo Guna, the predominance of a guna in a man, and then these Varnas are interchangeable. A person, a Rishi for example, a sage, might be a Brahmin, but if his son, if he was not having the qualities of a Brahmin, he was called a warrior. He was called a Kshatriya. So we have several examples like this even in our Puranas. For example, in Bhagavata, there is one story of a sage whose sons, some of them were kings, some of them were Brahmins. And then Vishwamitra, he was a king. But then he did austerities and he became a Brahmarshi, he became a Brahmana. So like that, it was something which was intertransferable. And caste is something which is, most of these people who are supposed to be there in so many castes today, they all belong to this Dvija community, who are all entitled to read, who are all entitled to study the scriptures, who are all entitled to study Vedas. But because of the efflux of time, because of the passage of time, because of so much of social turmoil in Indian society, we had forgotten our own tradition. And then like even the Brahmins have forgotten the tradition today, all other people had forgotten. And then they started thinking that they belong to some sort of inferior society, inferior castes. So this is the overall picture. And then the society, of course, it has taken all necessary steps to remove this particular thing called caste. It is only a matter of, in all urban areas, you just don't see caste. In all urban areas, there is absolutely no distinction. Apart from, the time when it comes to, if it is a time for marriage, okay, then people will see, okay, what is your caste, etc. But in urban areas, in an office, in any urban office, you will just not know to what caste the other person belongs. So it is only a matter of time that this will disappear. So thank you.